Hello everyone and welcome back to Russell's Movie Reviews, the show where I review stuff that's mostly pretty good and maybe one of the best movies of all time, or a film that absolutely sucks and should remain in the depths of hell. Um, Now if you guys remember yesterday, I reviewed a massive, cult classic, weird action adventure, fun romped film known as Big Trouble in Little China, and I thought that film was amazing, and it's now one of my favorite John Carpenter films of all time. Now, if you guys remember at the end of that review, I said that I was going to review another John Carpenter film, as you guys can tell by the title of the thumbnail. That film was They Live. And I thought that, well, I didn't state it in the review, but um, I just thought that since Big Trouble was such a fun romp for me, that it might affect my opinions on not Big Trouble, on They Live. Um, as I will go through this review, I will discuss my opinions on the film, but suffice to say, they did not affect my opinions, and overall, I think that this film was a. You know what? I'm just not gonna say it until the end of this review because I don't. I just don't want to spoil my opinions. So, um, I'll just say that Big Trouble did not affect my opinions on this film. Um, but this film, I'll say, it's not as good as Big Trouble, but it's still probably my top five favorite Carpenter films. So, yeah. Um, so my history with this film, was that it wasn't really the one of the John Carpenter was. It wasn't really the Carpenter film that I would initially say like, oh, like that film when Carpenter's name was brought up. Like it would always usually be Halloween, The Thing, or Big Trouble in Little China. It's one of those three. Um, and then other like films like Escape from New York, and maybe some others. But I never really thought of. I never said They Live because one, I never knew it was a jar. Uh, One, I never knew the film even really existed, and two, I never really knew it was a Carpenter film. But as I started getting into films over the years, I started to look back at Carpenter's back catalog of films, and I started to discover some of his lesser known films that I feel like um, that I'm like, oh, maybe I should check that out. Like, for example, They Live, but also like Skip from L.A., In the Mouth of Madness, um, and then like some of his not so good films like Ghosts of Mars and Village of the Damned. Um, but yeah, I've known about They Live for a few years now, and then luckily back in 2017, Best Buy released a two steelbooks for Escape from New York and They Live, and I picked both of them up, and I've had this in my collection for about 3 or 4 years, and I never watched this until this until today, where I watched it for the review. Um, um, and I think that I do want to discuss, you know, at least try and possibly do all the like every single John Carpenter film in at some point in during this review series, because I think I've done at least 4 or 5. I know I've done the first Halloween. I did The Thing, and I obviously yesterday I did Big Trouble in Little China. I guess could you technically count Halloween 2 as being a Carpenter film? I don't think so. So technically maybe 3, but I like 4 or 5 at least. Um, and so I want to discuss more of them, and I think I'll start that by discussing They Live. So let's go over it. So They Live was released on November 4th of 1988, with a budget of $4 million, and domestically it made $13 million. So far, I have unable to confirm how much it made worldwide, but it was a success. Um, Now, I didn't want to say this in the Big Trouble review because it didn't really suit it. Um, until maybe I did a review on, like I said, They Live, or his previous film before this, but I'll get to that. But basically, after Big Trouble in Little China bombed at the box office, um, that was Carpenter's last studio film, and he was like, "Nope, I'm just gonna get away from the Hollywood system and get back to making independent films." And so he started that by making in 1987 he made Prince of Darkness, starring Donald Pleasence, Dennis Dunn, as well as others, and that was a success. I don't know how much it made in total, but it was a success, and it was Carpenter's return to independent filmmaking. And then the year after that, he made They Live. Um, and They Live was also a success. Uh, so let's get on to the plot itself. So Nada, played by Roddy Piper, a wanderer without meaning in his life, discovers a pair of sunglasses capable of showing the world the way it truly is. As he walks the streets of Los Angeles, Nada notices both the media and the government are comprised of subliminal messages meant to keep the population subdued, and that most of the social elite are skull-faced aliens bent on world domination. Because, of course, with this shocking discovery, Nada, however you say it, I'm gonna say Nada. Nada fights to free humanity from the mind-controlling aliens. Now, I think this film was based off of a short story. I think it was called 8 o'clock in the morning. Um, where it's basically this guy who is subdued by, I think it's a con magician on the street. I forgot exactly what it was, but basically he does this thing which makes him, after he wakes up, he makes him see all these people turn into these squid-like creatures, and he has until 8 o'clock in the morning to um, fix the problem. Now, I believe this was turned into a comic adaptation called Nada, that was posted. The original story was posted in a fantasy and science fiction book, and then the comic adaptation was posted in some kind of science fiction anthology comic. Carpenter bought the rights for both the comic adaptation and the short story itself to make a possible film out of, which became They Live. Um, and I think that they should make these kinds of films more, because they've done um like, I don't know how to explain it, but there seems to be a resurgence of alien invasion films, and I just feel like that uh Hollywood should expand on the quote unquote alien invasion subgenre, where, to, like, for example, this kind of plot where, like, aliens have, like, integrated themselves into our society, and now it's like one person that needs to, stop their evil rule. Um because Carpenter the Carpenter had this idea of, um like, if, like, he didn't like he just saw aliens as, like, um creatures of, like, destructive being, because he grew up in the 1950s when alien invasion films were, like, at the peak of their popularity. Like, I think one of the biggest ones at the time was the War of the Worlds. So, he just thought that, like, why, like aliens aren't going to be, like, peaceful, and he thought that the that, like, for example, Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T. Would are like kind of like bad examples of, well, he just thought them as like, well, why, um like why are these films being made when it's really not how, like, aliens would act if they came down to this planet, which I can understand what he's saying there. Like, not saying that those films are bad. Like, Close Encounters and E.T. are great on their own merits, but it doesn't mean that they're bad just because that they revolve around, like, peaceful aliens. Not at all. But it's just like, if aliens were coming, like, were gonna arrive on Earth, they're not gonna be initially friendly at the beginning. They're probably gonna start destroying crap. So I can understand what Carpenter is trying to say here. Um, but let's get on to the cast. So we have Roddy Piper as Nada. Now, his character isn't given a name in the actual film itself. In the end credits, he's called Nada. Um, in what, like, on Google and Wikipedia, his name is stated as George Nada, and I think in the original making of featurette back in the 80s, it's either Piper or Carpenter that calls him John. For the sake of this review, I'm just gonna call him Nada. So Roddy Piper plays Nada, and I think he does great with the performance. He was before this, he was a wrestler, and I think he does fine with the performance that he's given. Um, we have the fantastic Keith David as Frank Armitage. I'm I'm probably butchered that last name, but he's great in this film. Um, I think this was the second or third collaboration between David and Carpenter, because I think his first collaboration with Carpenter was in The Thing, and um, I don't know if he did anything after The Thing with Carpenter, but sorry if I'm, like, yawning a lot. I don't know why. But I think that really any single time he does a collaboration with Carpenter, he's great. And he also starred in, or he has a cameo, or basically a cameo in one of my most underrated 80s films of all time, and that's Roadhouse. So, yeah. Um, but we have Meg Foster as Holly Thompson. Now, I guess, I mean, technically, yeah, the aliens are the villains. There's no doubt about that. But if I had to pick one person that was a central villain, I would say it's Holly, cause um he or she, like, after, I mean, grandly, Nana does kind of like hold her hostage when he initially meets her, but then once they arrive at her place, um she fucking just smacks him on the back of the head with a wine bottle and kicks him out of her window and makes him stumble, like, down the hill. And it's like, god damn, lady. And then she comes back at, like, the second or third act, being like, "Oh, John, I miss you. I thought I killed you." And then she comes back in the third act. Spoilers, by the way. Kills Frank off, and then comes up to the roof, holds Nada at gunpoint, and like, basically is just like drop the gun, just come downstairs and, like, just act normal. Which I'm like, okay, you're the villain this whole time, and you knew this whole time. And the she does get her comeuppance, which I will discuss when I get to favorite scenes. Um, we have Peter Jason as Gilbert. I think he does fine. Um, I just feel like that his character doesn't. I feel like his character should have lasted a little bit longer than he did in the film. We have Raymond Saint Cor- J. Cours. I'm so sorry if I butchered that last name. I probably most likely did. Who plays the street preacher, and uh, he does fine. With the few scenes that he has. And then finally we have George Buckflower as the drifter or the collaborator slash the collaborator. When he initially pops up, he just seems like a drunk. But then once you meet him again in the third act, uh, he's just like, he's just acting like a normal citizen. Um, he's not acting like how he was before, which was kind of surprising for me, honestly. Um, um, but I think he's one of the only few main characters that survives this film at the end. I mean, granted, the street preacher we don't even know if he died. Um, but I'll discuss that more when I get to favorite scenes and stuff like that. Which we're actually going to be talking about right now. So, favorite scenes. I'm gonna have to admit that the fight scene between Roddy or between Piper and David, um, is amazing. It's at least, I think the fight is like at least 6 minutes long, which is insane. Um, and obviously Piper being like a professional wrestler, he obviously knew uh what John Carpenter needed, but Keith wasn't. I think he did. I think he might have done boxing like for a short time, but he wasn't like he didn't really know like how to do it. So the stunt coordinator worked with both of them to try and you know make the fight scene as best as they can possibly make it. And I feel like that the fight scene I feel like should have been cut down at least a minute or two, which will come up to play when I discuss my rating for the film. But besides that, I think it is an excellent fight scene. Um, mostly the film isn't really an action film until like the second half of the second act, and like the rest of the third act. Really, just the third act entirely is just an action film, where like the first two are like more like kind of like mystery films, kind of, because it's first trying to discover like what's going on with the town, and then um like how to stop the aliens, and then basically once they figure it out, the last third of the film is just a straight up action film, and I think it's amazing. Um, and then really just like the final fight scene where, like I said, um, when I was talking about Holly's character, um, when like right before they get up to the roof, she kills Frank, which I gotta feel like that's kind of a callback to Assault on Precinct 13, which was his second film. Um, but um, in that film, um, the this is gonna sound so racist, but the black character in that, he goes up to try and get up to the telephone, and which is played by the actor who would play Apollo's manager, or Apollo's like Apollo's like trainer in the Rocky films. I think his name is like Tony Burt or Tony Burke. But yeah, he gets up to the light or to the telephone pole in Assault on Precinct 13, and once he gets up there, he stops for some reason, but then he gets killed off. Um, and I feel like that's kind of the same thing with Keith David's character. Like they finally get up to like this triumphant point, and then he gets unfortunately killed off. But you know, uh, Nada finds the satellite dish, and he's about to shoot it. And then Holly comes up and she's like I said earlier, she's like, don't they just put the gun down? We'll talk about this. But as we saw earlier, he had a smaller gun within his sleeve, so he pulls that out, shoots Holly, and then one of the great lines in the film is he just turns around to the dish and it's just a close up of his face and he just says "fuck it" and he shoots it. But right before that, the helicopters came up and they're like, put the gun down and get away from the satellite dish and surrender. So once he shoots Holly and he's like, fuck it, the cops open fire and they kill him, or they hit him and he falls down, but he destroys the satellite dish, and then his triumphant, um, what's his send off is basically just like him looking at the helicopters and then just him getting the bird, and then he dies. But destroying the satellite causes everyone to see the aliens, like basically for the first time, and everyone's like, "Whoa, what the hell?" Um, and yeah, and so I actually have a fun fact about the most famous line and my favorite line in the whole film, where you guys all know the famous line from the film, which is, "I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum." That line, well, fun fact, that line was actually improvised by Roddy himself. Like, it was, they need, I think, like, basically the story goes that, like, Carpenter needed, like, a badass line for the film, like, for that scene, and he's like, let me just think of, like, one of the lines that I used, like, in my wrestling career, and then he just pulled that out, and then, now it's like, it was so popular that I think even Duke Nukem started using it as a catchphrase. So that's gotta be something. And then the second fun fact is that did you know that since Roddy Piper was a married man at the time of filming, he refused to take off his wedding ring before shooting started, so that in several scenes throughout the film, you could see a ring on Nada's hand. So yeah, apparently the story goes is that, like, he refused to take off his wedding ring before shooting started. So throughout the film, you could see that he has a ring on his finger in several shots in the film. Personally, I didn't see it grandly because I didn't know about that, and two, even if I did, I wasn't actively trying to look for it because I was just trying to have a good time. Um, and yeah. Um, Before we get on to the score and my rating for the film, I just want to discuss this fantastic Steelbook Edition, which is released by the same people who did the Big Trouble in Little China Scream Factory. And this Steelbook Edition is great. There is the disc right there, and then on this side over here is the famous line from the film. Obviously, "I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum." Um, but it's just kind of unfortunate that I'm pretty sure this is the same disc that was released on the standard edition that came out, which I believe that version, along with the Steelbook, is out of print. But I just kind of wish that they could have done another disc for this. Thankfully, there is a 4K edition that's out. Will I be getting that version? I don't really know. I probably will be picking up the 4K version of Prince of Darkness since I don't have that in my collection yet. But in terms of They Live, in terms of the 4K edition, I'm not exactly sure. But the music was composed by John Carpenter and Alan Howarth, same people who did the Big Trouble score, and this was their final collaboration together. I believe there was an original version of the soundtrack that came out in '88, which does, I believe, just include Carpenter's the actual score, and it had about 30 minutes worth of tracks. But then 20 years later, they released a complete soundtrack for the 20th anniversary. Um, Trying to find a physical copy for that release may be difficult because of the high price and stuff like that. But I believe you can stream it through. I know iTunes. I'm not sure about YouTube Music. I'm not exactly sure. Um, but yeah, trying to find the original album release is one, very difficult to find, and two, again, it's very expensive. So I don't suggest trying to hunt it down unless you just have a buttload of money to spend. Then go right ahead. But if you want to save some cash, then just get the digital version on iTunes. So um, there you go. So final thoughts on They Live. As I said at the beginning, I thought that my overall love for Big Trouble in Little China would affect my feeling or my rating for this film, and it did not. I still feel like this is a very entertaining film and one of John Carpenter's least appreciated films. I mean, yeah, this is still uh, like the people who do talk about this film generally say that this is a very good film, but they don't talk about it as much as The Thing, Halloween, Big Trouble in Little China, and some of John Carpenter's more well-known films. So, um, you know, I still like this film, but as I said earlier, I think that the fight scene could have been trimmed a bit, um, and also some scenes throughout the film could have been slightly either extended or um, either like slightly increased or decreased in amount of time. So that's why I'm gonna give this film a B. Uh, Still probably my fifth favorite John Carpenter film as of now. But I don't think it's as good as Big Trouble, Halloween, or The Thing. So, still recommend this film, but just I don't think it's as good as some of his more well-known films. So yeah, that is it for not only They Live, but also the John Carpenter duo for season 3. Stay tuned for hopefully later on today, where I will be discussing the last two reviews for season 3, which will also be the last two historical films I will be discussing for the channel, or for season 3, sorry, and that is both Captain Phillips and The Untouchables, starting with Captain Phillips. So anyway, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this review. Click at my face over here, or down at that bar down there where my name is, to hit that subscribe button and that bell icon. For new future notifications, and also to keep known where or when new videos are coming out. And click over here for the previous two reviews. Links down in the description below for my Instagram and Facebook to also get notifications when new videos are coming out. And stay tuned for later on today where I'll be discussing Captain Phillips. So anyway, live long and prosper. And you know what? I'm not going to end with live long and prosper. I already forgot the line. I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. But unfortunately, I'm all out of bubblegum. Anyways, see you guys later.